What's going on YouTube? It's Tej, back again with another video, and today we're talking about the Buffalo Bills in our season preview series. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button to help me out a ton. And if you're new right here, want to see more sports content in the rest of this series, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button so we can continue to make our climb to 1,000 subscribers. And of course, tell me what you think about the Bills down in the comment section. I have a feeling that you think they're a pretty good team because I think they're a pretty good team. They're an awesome roster, but how far can this team go? Do you think they can get that Super Bowl, that first one in franchise history? Tell me what you think about the Bills down below. I respond to just about every comment so we can talk about Buffalo in the comments section. If you're new to this series, definitely go back and check out those previous videos. You get a feel for how I do things, but I'll still kind of walk through that as we move along. Win range, 12 to 15 wins. I got them at 15, so I'm definitely on the high side of this. They are my pick to win the Super Bowl right now. As good a roster, them and the Bucs in my eyes, kind of 1 and 2, and kind of the best in each of their conferences. Kind of the disadvantage for Buffalo versus Tampa, though, is just it's a loaded AFC, a lot harder of a road to work through. But kind of going position group by position group. Josh Allen, he was my number one, player in that draft class. I was banging the table that the Browns should take him at number 1. Ends up being Baker Mayfield. I used to literally have a college radio show where I would do a mock draft every so often, and I was just literally pounding the table for Josh Allen as that number 1 guy. And I'm really glad it's worked out. Toolsy quarterbacks are definitely risky, but Josh Allen, one of the best quarterbacks, getting paid big money for a good reason. And then you add James Cook in that backfield, right? So Devin Singletary's been fine. Zach Moss has been fine. Both these guys were kind of undersized, not overly fast, can catch the football all right. And then Josh Allen's a huge part of that running game. And now you're hearing Sean McDermott say, yeah, well, in part, Brian Daboll's gone as well. Ken Dorsey can be the OC, but he was a QB's coach. Expect more of the same. But, now that they're paying Josh Allen that much money, you hear Sean McDermott and Ken Dorsey talked about, maybe we don't want Josh Allen as active in the running game. And I think that's where James Cook comes into the play. And, maybe not necessarily as the goal line guy, which, I think there's a case for those small, shifty guys being just as good as, your traditional power backs in those spots. But just somebody who, hey, we throw the ball on early downs a ton. Now we can keep defenses on their toes, and instead of Josh Allen having to take hits, we can hand it off, and it's James Cook making that play. And he's also a guy who, almost like Dalvin Cook, where he's got that 4.4 speed, and that's just something Singletary and Moss don't have. So that home run ability, if you want to call it that, but just that quick hitter, that speed out of the backfield, and is also a great pass catcher. So more of the same there, where they have another pass catching option coming out of the backfield. So good for the offense that's going to chuck it, but that added speed, and it's just one more guy to add into the fold to where I think you're going to see a few less carries for Josh Allen this year, and that's probably a good business decision, right? You're paying that guy big money. You want to see him out on the field. A few less hits against the body of Josh Allen and a few more carries and touches go into those running backs. And the wide receivers, we'll talk about Gabe Davis later, but Stephon Diggs, I got him as a top 5 wide receiver in the league. If you're familiar with this channel, I'm a huge Stephon Diggs guy, and I'm a huge fan of wide receivers who are crisp route runners, and that's Stephon Diggs through and through. That dude gets open for himself and then makes the game easy for whoever his quarterback is. So love him, but and we'll talk about Davis later. But Jamison Crowder, really sneaky, nice veteran ad. He's had his injury concerns, but when he's on the field, that is more than enough out of a slot wide receiver. And then you also draft Khalil Shakir in the 5th round. That's awesome draft surplus value, and I think a guy who can totally step in to that slot wide receiver role if Crowder does get hurt, or those two can share that role. The offensive line, it's nothing crazy, but we'll talk about Spencer Brown later. But if this offensive line unit just plays at an average level, the offense will continue as on schedule. And then on the defense, you bring in a Von Miller. Ed Oliver's been a bit of a disappointment. You bring in Tim Settle, 2 years, small contract, $8 maybe $9 million. Smart, savvy move there. And Brandon Beane, my favorite GM in the league. This guy just, everything he does doesn't need to be a home run, but it's just sound. It's smart. It makes sense. You understand it. Like, I could wax poetic about Brandon Beane till the end of the day, so I won't. But big fan of the move and his team building process and ideologies. But Tim Settle, if Ed Oliver continues to struggle, you bring in a guy like Tim Settle. This team doesn't really have a guy who's had a whole lot of success stopping the run. You literally, if you have like a Pro Football Focus subscription, you can go and just look at their interior defenders, and nobody has like a grade above 60 against the run. So that's not ideal, especially considering, Tremaine Edmonds hasn't been awesome. Matt Milano is more of a coverage linebacker, so kind of hitting on those guys. They have their strengths. Edmonds really solid, athlete. Kind of, we were talking about Patrick Queen with the Ravens, where this guy he is what you wanted an NFL linebacker to look like. It just hasn't totally come together. But both those guys, I would say their strengths are probably coverage based. Maybe Edmonds is your headhunter, and you just kind of let him be athlete and point a gun, shoot him in the right direction, and hope big plays come after it. So I am a little concerned about this team's run defense, but I think Oliver, he's still a young guy. Edmonds, same thing. Those guys can take leaps forward. But if Oliver doesn't get there, you have Tim Settle. They've always been able to have that next guy up. And then you look on the wings, the edges. I don't know why I call it the wings, not playing basketball. But on the edges, you bring in Von Miller. I mean, yeah, I know that, the 6-year, 120 is what you focus on, but it's not really what the deal is. But even if it is, this team's been looking and desperately trying to find that guy who will turn pressures into sacks. And Von Miller, we saw what he did in the playoffs last year for the Rams. If you're the Bills, why would you not want that on your team? And then you talk about a Greg Rousseau, an AJ Epineza that they've drafted in the past couple of years, and Boogie Basham in the second round after they took Rousseau in the first last year. So this team is just stockpiled edge rushers, and it could be a situation where, especially as Vaughn gets older, they're just going to have a true rotation. Every couple of snaps, they're mixing guys in and out. And, then when third down, fourth quarter, then you have your Von Miller and your, next best guy on the other side, whoever they think that is, Epineza, Rousseau, whoever. But I'm just fascinated. Those guys, that's a unit that's going to be able to stay fresh, rushing the passer, but they also have a guy who is a future Hall of Famer in Von Miller. So that just adds so much more gravitas. We've already talked about the linebackers. Cornerback group, we'll talk about Kyrie Elam, but if Trey White's able to come back healthy, that's obviously a huge plus. Losing Levi Wallace, though, I do worry about that boundary corner depth. Maybe they'll add a Joe Hayden at the time of me recording this. Is a little pre-recorded. Hasn't been signed by anybody yet, but I could see them going out and add another veteran who can play on the outside. Teron Johnson's been good in the nickel, so I think they're okay there. And then the safeties have been as good a duo as there is in the NFL, right? And Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. So fantastic there. Barring injuries, you're set and ready to go at that safety spot. Team building wise, those guys are starting to get a little older. Maybe you're looking to find who can, who they can pass the torch on to. But for right now, that's as good a duo as it is in the NFL. So kind of all going back in a long way of saying this roster is as good as there is in the NFL. And again, I would say it's the best roster in the AFC. So 15 wins, that might be a little high. Maybe they're a 14-3 team, 13-4, but I have them as the number one seed in the AFC. And again, I have them winning a Super Bowl. So realistic goal, I think every realistic goal I sign these teams is within reach. And then a reach goal, poor wording there, but reach goal is kind of that school that you really didn't have any business applying to, or that job that you don't fully meet the requirements and credentials for, but you send the application anyway. So that's kind of the premise here. But realistic goal, reach a divisional round, so I'm assuming, that could be first round bye maybe, or if you're the 2 seed, let's say, and you win that wild card game. So getting a playoff win or getting that first round bye, I think that's a safe, floor for one of the best teams in the league. And then the reach goal should be win the Super Bowl. If they're aiming for anything less, then that's a disappointment, right? Like I've had people argue saying get to the conference championships, because then it's win that game, the Super Bowl, it's one game. Once you get into that Final Four, anything's possible. Once you're in that spot, you're giving yourself a chance, and then football's gonna be football. And I get that, but you're also just one of the best teams in the league. Go ahead and just aim for the highest prize. So win that first Super Bowl, right? You went to 4 straight in the 90s. Time to bring back that first Lombardi to Bills Mafia. They totally deserve it. And then, Bills Mafia has been a huge part of this Bills turnaround, on top of, Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, all that. But just see that fan base kind of get reinvigorated. I don't want to say reinvigorated. I don't know if they ever went anywhere, but to see them become such a huge storyline and a big part of when you go to Buffalo, you have to deal with Bills Mafia. It's been pretty cool. Random tangent aside, let's move on to some X factors now. So Gabe Davis, the guy in the picture. I mean, this guy, I don't know if it's still that way on the Wikipedia page, but I am convinced he's the sole owner of Mike Hughes' soul. So tore him up in that Chiefs-Bills playoff game last year. And if that's the Gabe Davis we get next year, look out. This guy, vertical route tree wide receiver coming out of UCF, and that on top of Stephon Diggs is already a really nice, supplement of skills, right? Diggs can be he can win at all 3 levels, but that good of a route runner, if he can work that 10 to 20 yard range and be our possession guy when we need him to, great. And then if Gabe Davis can be that field stretcher, awesome. And we started to see that. And from one year to the next, he's progressively gotten better. And I think a lot of people, myself included, are kind of projecting that breakout. I think a lot of statistical projections looking at fantasy football have him up and over 1,000 yards, which that's pretty cool. So if he's that type of guy and brings that big play element, this offense is going to be clicking on all cylinders. And then Spencer Brown's a big part of it. That's kind of the one spot on the offensive line that's not insane. Maybe John Bates at that right guard spot right next to him. But, they offered that tender sheet out to John Bates, so they clearly like him. Spencer Brown, day 2 pick last year. I think there's a little bit more stock into that versus a Ryan Bates. But especially, and also I'm picking Brown over Bates because tackle versus guard, but that position value. But if Brown takes that year 2 jump, gets that much more stable. I mean, they did release Darrell Williams, so there should be some sort of confidence that's being boasted by that Buffalo Bills, front office and coaching staff. So if that adds up, and he's that much better in year 2, that offensive line, it may not wow or anything like that. Like it kind of just is a Deion Dawkins where it's like, that's really solid. That's a good unit. you can live with that. And that's all you need. When you have Josh Allen, James Cook, those running backs, those wide receivers, that's really all you need. Ken Dorsey is a play caller. Joe Brady is the QB coach. That'd be interesting to see what he, turns his value and stock into this next offseason. Anyways, Spencer Brown, if he's just not that weak link, it's a weak link type of, unit. If he's not that and he's just solid, that unit's going to be good enough to get this team to a Super Bowl. And then last player we'll talk about, switching sides of the ball, Kaiir Elam, right? Guy that, go back to my way too early big board ranking, in my top 10. I'm a huge Kaiir Elam guy. Now, we'll see how he, fits into this Sean McDermott defense, Leslie Frazier defense as the DC. But at the same time, he was the best cornerback on the board, and they only had to move up 2 spots to ensure that they got him. And they've long been looking for that number 2 corner. Like, Levi Wallace was solid and stable, but I think part of the reason he was perceived as stable and solid was because of that defense that Leslie Frazier runs. So, how does Kaiir Elam take that defense? That will be interesting. I also think he could be a guy benefited if you do bring in a Joe Hayden or something like that. Another veteran in the room that can only help his process of growing from a college player and getting acclimated with the NFL and the speed of the game. So interesting to see, but long arms, runs in the 4.4. So much of when you look at Kaiir Elam and his draft, profile says that guy's an NFL cornerback. I thought of him more as a man press kind of based defensive cornerback. A little different in Buffalo, a lot of 2 high, a lot of cover 2, a lot of cover 4. But that being said, when you have those traits, going back to my draft wide receivers video I was just put out, traits. What NFL teams covet, Kaiir Elam has them. You can coach up how he fits into that defense. So if the Bills can do that, yeah, then that secondary, that last little weak link on the defensive side, that number 2 corner spot, wiped away, take it off the whiteboard, you're good to go. And again, this roster just gets that much better. Some games to watch, and then we'll get you out of here. So you'll see a common thread here. These are all really good teams. Week 4 at the Baltimore Ravens. I even talked about this game in the Baltimore Ravens video. But actually, weeks 1 through 6 for the Bills is pretty bonkers. So they have the first game of the year at LA. Thought about putting that game on here just because Thursday Night Football starts the season. Yeah, but that being said, that game and every AFC East game, not including this game, to watch because duh. If you're not watching the very first game of the season, you don't have a good excuse, then, are you really a football fan? And then, division games all matter. Of course, you should watch those if you're a Bills fan. So I'm trying to pick out some other ones, but, week 4 against the Ravens, it's a really fascinating one. Week 2, Monday Night Football against the Titans. That feels like if they do lose the Rams week 1, that Monday night game on national television feels like it is a big one because you don't want to start the year 0-2. But decided to go with this Ravens game, 2 of the best teams in the AFC, and even talked about this in my Ravens video where so many teams were stockpiling assets, Bills included. The Ravens just kind of got healthy, couple moves here and there, and they're still one of the best teams in the AFC. So I'm just fascinated. Plus, that game's in Baltimore, so road challenge there. Now, the Bills are a team that I think are pretty translatable to wherever they're playing because they have such a well-balanced roster. They can win in a variety of ways. So that'll be interesting to see. When you go into Baltimore, how does this team play? How do they match up against the Ravens? Then week 8 at home against Green Bay. I mean, Josh Allen versus Aaron Rodgers. Need I say more? And it's Sunday Night Football, so we got Mike Tirico, Chris Collinsworth on the call. Yeah, I'm eating that up, and potential. Maybe we'll see what that wide receiver room in Green Bay looks like, but potential Super Bowl preview, who knows? So obviously, big game to watch there. And then week 17 against the Cincinnati Bengals, Monday Night Football. Again, I don't include division games, so it got kind of thin towards the back half of their schedule. But it's also interesting to look, week 1 versus week 18. How much better did this team get? Did they improve or did they get worse because of injuries or coaching or just this team didn't get better, right? Like, it didn't come together. They didn't improve week to week. Sometimes that just happens. So, interested to see where this team starts the year versus, what they look like on Monday Night Football against the Cincinnati Bengals. This is also just a battle of, maybe the Bengals repeat as AFC North champs. So, this could be a battle for the number 1 seed, the number 2 seed, the number 3, the number 4. Now, or maybe, this is kind of harder to believe for the AFC East, but maybe Miami really exceeds expectations and they win the AFC East and the Bengals are playing catch up with the Ravens, then it's wild card seeding and then it gets that much more interesting. So but really talk about it as if those two are division winners. That's really where the intrigue comes. If you're Buffalo, you have as good a home field advantage as there is in the NFL. Like, you do not want to play in Buffalo in January. So plus Bills Mafia, again, singing the praises of Bills Mafia. Any and all home games you can have, they're a must. So if you're the 2 seed and it's until you run to that top seed in the AFC that you're playing at home, make it, you gotta have it. So if this is a battle for that number 2 seed between the Bengals and the Bills, it feels like a huge game late in the season, and maybe it's a battle for the 1 seed. We'll see. Only time will be able to tell that story. But that is going to do it for my Buffalo Bills season preview. Tell me what you think about this team down below in the comment section. Do you think they can win that Super Bowl? Do you think they fall short in the playoffs again this year? What are some potential holes you see on this roster? And who are some X factors, not superstars, but X factors that you think could truly be the difference between exceeding or falling short of expectations? Love to have your thoughts down below in the comment section. Respond to just about every comment as well. So talk about the Bills down below. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It helped me out a ton. And if you're new around here, want to see more of this series and football content in general, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.